Paul Auerbach, 62. Uh, at Penn Law, obviously, it was a matter of applying and applying for a scholarship and getting admitted. I mean, Penn was a different thing for me because as a small child, around 5 or 6, I had an operation. And again, this is personal to me, but apparently they screwed up. Today that would be a malpractice case. And I spoke nasally. So they took me down, my parents took me down to Penn when I was that young, and I walked through what was then the Ivy and all that, and I just said, I'm going to go here someday. Not knowing what that meant, but I just did. Well, I remember a certain amount of things. One event in particular, again, because it was very personal but also instructive, and you're waiting for me to describe it. The professor of torts was Clarence Morris, highly respected national figure in that field, but also a very tough professor, the kind of man who would call your name to recite or answer his questions, and if your sentences began in a way he didn't like, he literally went off you and picked someone else, which left you in the middle of speech. So he was very tough, very feared in that manner by the class. I had him in my second year for something called Great Legal Philosophers, which he taught. And my rule has always been, still is today, and I'm violating it at the moment, don't volunteer. So I never volunteered to answer questions. But one day he asked a particular question, and for some testonic reason, I don't know, testosterone flow or what have you, actually raised my hand and answered the question, or started to. And he did to me what he did to others, and he just zoomed off to another person, leaving me in mid-speech. I never particularly liked that, and at the end of the class, I picked up the textbook and reviewed it and felt that my answer was right. And I went up to the library between classes, and his office door was open, and I went in. He welcomed me in, and I told him exactly what I felt. I said, I feel that my answer that I was about to give, and you cut me off midstream and gave your own answer later on because no one got it right. I said I felt my answer was right. And he looked at me and he said, I really don't give a damn what you think, which certainly didn't encourage freedom of thought and expression and dialogue. And he then suggested, where do you plan to practice law? And I said I hadn't thought about it. It was only my second year. And he said, well, there are some openings in Kenya, Africa, and he was willing to put in a good word for me, which I declined gracefully and left. And I don't know about other students and other people, but I guess that experience is one that you either grow from or you get devastated. And I decided I wasn't going to get devastated. And for a shy person, I thought that was somewhat courageous, but nevertheless didn't do anything. He still thought what he thought. The next class was 2 days later, and he walked in and he started the class with a statement. He said, last Tuesday, he said, I asked the following question, and I said the answer was, and I said, oh my God, he's going to embarrass me in front of the class. And he said, Auerbach said it was, and he gave the correct answer that I had thought was correct. And he then said, Auerbach was right and I was wrong, which was to the total silence of the class. But you have to, you know, as a thing, I thought that was a great learning experience. Here was a person with a tremendous amount of prestige. He could have gotten through this. He could have made the correction and no one would have known anything. but he had to do it publicly in the same forum that his error had been made. And I always felt I never should be afraid to admit being wrong as such. The only other story that I could say regarding him, and it's real quick, he was married to a woman from Texas, and one of the visions I have is him walking up the rotunda out here, the steps, hand in hand with his wife who was visiting him one day, and I thought that was just an amazing picture. So that's my fondest memories. There are others. There were a lot of good teachers and a lot of good things like that. Some were not as tough. Fairness, I never particularly liked a system in which you never had any inclination of what you were doing except by the final grade in a test that was examined or graded anonymously. In other words, they didn't know who you were or anything like that. I would say the teachers were all very good. There were some characters, but I enjoyed my 3 years here. I went back to Penn Graduate School to get a doctorate in history. I completed the preliminary orals and then decided maybe I should start working for a living. Applied for work. There wasn't a whole lot out there at the time, but I did get an offer from Liberty Mutual Insurance Company to be a trial attorney for them. Probably being a trial attorney was the last thing in the world I had ever expected to be, but it was there, and I took it, and it turned out I really liked to go to trial. Thereafter, I was offered a position at Philadelphia Electric Company as Assistant General Counsel, and took that, and eventually retired from there and went into administrative law for individuals who were injured at work and were not getting their benefits from their employers. And that's what I still do. I think everything that makes a human being more knowledgeable about what went on in the world and what is going on in the world is helpful to you as a person and helpful to you as a lawyer.
And lastly, do you have any advice for new Penn Law students or new lawyers?
Well, I really don't know that I can give advice. It's a different world today. They do much more. I hear about the kind of activities that today's law students here engage in before they come to law school and then after. That kind of pressure was not on us at that time. And it's both commendable to me that they do it, but at the same time, I don't know how much they pay for it in terms of family life or what have you. And I've been married since 1966 to the same person, and I'm very much family orientated. And I don't envy those who work in other fields and are constantly running almost 24/7 doing things, but I sort of feel that people need a family life to enjoy. So all I can say is try to balance what you do at school, and if you go into the profession, well, I don't know, there's a lot of people that don't go into the profession even though they graduate law school. And I feel whatever it is, the law school education is a help and should enrich their lives and make them more desirable in whatever future fields they wish to encounter.